The New Orleans settlement was founded by French colonialist Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne in 1718. It is located at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Originally, it was claimed by France to compete with Spain and Britain for land in the American Southeast, but it soon became an important port city for France's Louisiana territory. After Thomas Jefferson purchased Louisiana in the early 1800s, the city began expanding, most of it still keeping very close to the Mississippi River. Its relevance as a port city was still important, as it was a strategic break of bulk point for supplies needed for western expansion. Modern New Orleans has expanded all the way up the shores of Lake Pontchartrain and includes more inland developments. Even more residential neighborhoods have been constructed across the river from the original city. New Orleans today consists of 13 zones. Zone 1A marks the location of the original French settlement, now known as the French Quarter. Zones 1B and 2 contain most of the city's business and non-residential buildings. Because of this, it can be claimed that New Orleans roughly follows a concentric zone model. The red circle indicates where most of the city's business takes place. In this circle, you can find the French Quarter, the Superdome, and Loyola University. The farther away from this circle you go, the more residential the city becomes. There are no major informal settlements in New Orleans. However, housing did become an issue for many people in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina completely devastated the city, killing 1,200 people and causing $108 billion in damage. The worst destruction came when 5 major levees broke down, causing widespread flooding throughout the city. Many people living in government projects lost their homes and were forced to evacuate on their own, some going as far as Texas or Mississippi. Even 2 years after the hurricane, only 60% of the original population returned to the city. Because the city is not fully recovered, adult illiteracy is at an all-time high, with 39% of adults in New Orleans unable to read or write past a 5th grade level. Poverty is also an issue, with 32% of New Orleans residents living below the poverty line. Despite this, the economy is still managing to grow, and the city is continuing to recover from the storm.
The history of La Paz, Bolivia is much like the history of other cities in the Americas. Native people have occupied the land for centuries. In La Paz's case, natives have lived in the area since 1500 BC. But, as you know, conquistadors came over and they took what they wanted. So they came, they saw, they conquered. The original function of the city was to connect commercial routes, but fellow conquistadors got greedy and one beheaded the other, leading to war. The Royalists won the war, and there was soon a peace treaty between the Royalists and Pizarro's followers. That's why La Paz is named La Paz, because it means the peace. So the city was actually founded in October 20th, 1548, and it was relocated to the valley because there was better locations. Think gold and good agriculture conditions. Okay, so in regard to informal settlements now, in most Bolivian cities, a third of the inhabitants live in informal settlements. These are located on steep hillsides that are geologically unstable and prone to landslides. In an effort to improve these conditions, the Bolivian government has implemented comprehensive neighborhood strategies that are just focused on meeting the basic needs of the very poor and increasing participation in the community. The goal of these is to provide basic needs, and the main focuses are physical infrastructure and community development. True neighborhoods are really the result of this, and it's that in La Paz's 50 poorest neighborhoods, 12,000 families enjoy a better quality of life because of the new housing, and it gives them access to parks, waters, and sanitation services, and other urban improvement solutions. Education in La Paz is a huge issue. While it says that the average child might spend about 13 years, that's an overestimate, and in the cities it's only about 9 years. The literacy rate is only 91.2%, which isn't the greatest. And the problem is that there's really dilapidated school buildings and less than an ideal promotion rate. The city's been working on this, and in 2008 they implemented a $10 million strategy over 5 years to just help this. In the course of the 5 years, 4,500 students, there was an increase in that many of enrollment, and the promotion rate increased by 4%. Also, 4 school buildings were renovated and 3 were rebuilt. The municipality of La Paz continues to work on improving the education, but it's not addressing that 26% of kids between 5 and 14 don't go to school because they're in the labor force. But it's hard to solve that, because if these kids didn't work, their families might not get fed. Unemployment's not really, it's a pretty big issue, but it's not as bad as it is in other countries with 7.4%. Many policies have been enacted since 2004, and over 50,000 jobs have been created just in the city alone to help with the unemployment rate. Infrastructure is being rebuilt because of all these people working, and it's just been really good for the city, and it continues to happen. Lastly, the population trends of Bolivia are much like cities around the world. It's only growing. In 2001, the population was about 800,000, and now it's 1.8 million. There's been 68% of the people live in urban areas, with an annual rate of urbanization at 2.26%. And the city's only expanding, as I said, because people are moving from rural areas in search of jobs, better health care, and more access to resources. It has a population 4.5 times greater than New Orleans, 1.9 times smaller than Durban, and 4.2 times smaller than Hong Kong. And the policies about population trends are that they only are trying to provide resources to people. So they're continuing building health clinics and building these housing developments so that people don't have to resort to informal settlements.
Durban, South Africa is located on the southeastern tip of Africa. At a population of about 3.2 million, it is the second largest city in South Africa, just behind Cape Town. The population of Durban is almost half the size of Hong Kong, double the size of La Paz, and about 9 times as large as New Orleans. The population trends in Durban indicate that it is increasing at a relatively steady rate, and the physical growth of the city also shows this trend. The population is made up of about 63% Black, 22% Asian, 11% white, and 3% is unidentified. Even though the majority of the population is Black, most reside in the informal settlements on the outskirts of town. There are a total of about 920,000 people that live in the slums, which is almost 1/3 of Durban's total metropolitan population. This is an unfortunate reality of the post-apartheid state, because during apartheid there was a serious lack of government programs, aid, or assistance towards Black people. The poor people were even forcibly removed from their previous homes when the city was expanding to make room for new buildings. The forced relocations are still happening today. In 2010, prior to the building of the World Cup Stadium, the Moses Mabhida, poor people living on and around that land were forcibly removed in order to make room for the stadium, shops, hotels, and other attractions. These types of informal settlements cannot be found in New Orleans, for example, because in America there are numerous charities and government programs to assist the poor and the homeless. These types of informal settlements can, however, be found in La Paz, Bolivia. Primary education in Durban, South Africa isn't bad. The average number of years of schooling is 9.9 years. So that means the average education level is around a middle school or a couple years of high school completed. This number is lower than La Paz, Hong Kong, and New Orleans, where the average years of schooling is between 13 and 16. There is, however, a college on the outskirts of town, but that is not primary education. The unemployment rate in Durban is about 24%, which is significantly higher than the 3 other cities previously mentioned. This is largely due to the amount of people in the informal settlements. There aren't enough jobs in the city to accommodate the ever-growing population, and once again, the effects of apartheid are still being felt. There is a lack of government policy and plans to help fix the unemployment problem, and it is increasing almost every quarter.
So guys, I'm just sitting here chilling under Walter White here today to talk to you about Hong Kong and a few topics and the government's policies regarding those topics. And the first thing I want to talk to you today about is informal settlements. And what's going on in Hong Kong right now is a thing that's called rooftop dwellings or rooftop slums. And what they are basically just communities that are built on top of buildings from poor areas in Hong Kong. And technically it's illegal, but the Hong Kong government really doesn't enforce anything to fight it because they don't have a place to put these people because the population is so big that there's really no place that these families can afford to live in. So it's really just let them live or kick them out on the streets. And as long as they're not causing a problem to anyone, they just really just let them live. The next thing I want to talk to you about is education. The education system in Hong Kong is 9 years of what they call compulsory education or mandatory education, which includes 6 years of primary school, followed by 3 years of junior secondary school with an option at either end with kindergarten and or senior secondary school. But recently, the government has pushed forth legislation that levy not taxes, but fees and exams on to get into senior secondary school, so more students can get that extra level of education for a full 12 years. Next thing I want to talk to you today about is unemployment. And the unemployment in Hong Kong, it's very strict, the restrictions to get benefits. You have to be between 15 and 59. You have to have lived in Hong Kong for at least 7 years, and you have to undergo a full finance and background check. And it's all like they look at your family, they look at a lot of stuff. So it's very, very hard to get these benefits. They don't just give them out to anyone. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about is population. The population in Hong Kong over the years has been drastically increasing, but recently the birth rate has declined, so the growth rate is slowly declining. But since the maternal mortality rate is decreasing, there's more and more of an older population, so it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And what they project is that Hong Kong's population to be 8.469 million by 2041.